Hello and welcome back to another week here at Knack kitchen, where today we are making an orange chiffon cake. This cake is arguably one of my favorites and I can rave about it for hours, but I'm not gonna do that. Instead, I'm gonna hope that you try this recipe and I'm sure that you're gonna rave about it just as much as I do. So without further ado, let's just see how we make it. So the first step is to separate your eggs, and you should do this while your eggs are cold because eggs separate better when they're cold. And once your eggs come to room temperature, we start with the whites. So here I have some clean beaters because I want to ensure that the whites beat up nicely and become white and fluffy and reach their full volume. So once we're at the stage of soft peaks, we can go ahead and add half our sugar and beat that nicely until all of the sugar is dissolved in the mixture. Now if your egg whites are spreading too much, then just use a spatula or a spoon to scrape down the sides and then beat the mixture. This will just ensure that your egg whites are beaten evenly. So now we'll add the remaining sugar and beat this in until we have stiff peaks and the mixture turns glossy. Now the way that I learned to test this mixture is to invert it on top of your head, and if it does not fall, that means your mixture is ready, and in case it does, it just means that you need to go take a shower and start all over again. Now since my egg whites were done, I'm moving on to the yolks and I'm using the same beaters, mostly because I'm lazy and also because it does not make a difference. And to that I'm adding the sugar, and now I'm going to beat this mixture for at least 3 to 4 minutes until the mixture turns thick and the color becomes a lot lighter, as you can see over here. And at that point we're going to go ahead and add the oil, and along with the oil we'll also add the orange juice, and to that we'll also add the orange zest, and then we'll beat this all together. We are only beating the mixture to combine, so it only takes about 30 seconds and we can go ahead and add the dry ingredients. So here I have some corn flour and some baking powder, and although I give it a mix, you can just directly add your flour and then mix this as well. And in case you're wondering, the reason I'm using corn flour is because it gives our cake a lighter texture, and I've come to know recently that a very good substitute for cake flour, which you'll see in a lot of recipes, is to use plain flour mixed with corn flour. So as you can see, now I've gotten rid of my beater and moved on to using my spatula, and that's because we're going to now mix in our egg white mixture with our yolk mixture. And this I do in 3 parts, ensuring that I do it carefully because I do not want to deflate all the air that was created in the egg white mixture. So here I'm very carefully folding in the egg white mixture into the yolk batter so as to ensure that I do not lose much volume, and that will give our cake a light and tender crumb. Now when it comes to folding, one thing which I've learned from experience is that if you do not scrape all the way down to the bottom when you're mixing the egg whites, you will end up with a denser cake at the bottom and a lighter cake at the top half of your cake. So in order to avoid that, ensure that when you're folding in the egg whites, you go all the way down to the bottom and scrape to the top, and that way you're distributing the egg whites evenly, and eventually you'll have a batter which is evenly light and fluffy, as you can see over here. And now our cake batter is ready to be poured into our prepared cake tin, and here I have a bundt pan which I have lightly greased with oil and then dusted with flour. And in case you don't have a bundt pan, you can use a 9-inch cake tin as well. Gently tap the cake on your countertop a couple of times to ensure that you get rid of any air bubbles that might be there in the batter. And now our cake is ready to go into a preheated oven for about 55 minutes. And I'd suggest that you cover the cake with foil after about 35 minutes, otherwise your cake will brown too much. So here our cake is ready as it's loosening from the sides. We're going to quickly invert this on a wired rack and let this cool completely until it comes to room temperature. So this will take about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So in the meanwhile, we'll prepare our glaze, which will go on top of our cooled cake. So for our glaze, I have some icing sugar to which I'm adding some citric acid, and some orange essence, both of which are optional actually. And what's not optional is the orange juice. However, I would also suggest that in case you're not using citric acid, then you might want to substitute a teaspoon of your orange juice with some lemon juice, which will give an additional tang to your icing. So now I'm just going to mix this together until I have a smooth glaze. And here, although it's becoming smoother, I feel it's a little too thick, so I'm adding a little more orange juice. So you'll require somewhere between 2 to 2.5 tablespoons of orange juice. So now that the glaze is at the desired consistency, I'm going to set this aside until I'm ready to pour it on the cake. So for the assembly, all we have to do is pour the prepared glaze on top of the cooled cake. So here I'm removing the pan, and as you can see there are a few patches, but that's typical for this cake, so you don't need to worry. It's still gonna taste absolutely delicious. Just pour the glaze right on top in an even layer, and as you can see that there is a lot of dripping, so just collect that in a pan and spoon that over, and then your cake is ready. So here you have my recipe for a classic orange chiffon cake, which is so light and so tender, it's almost like eating an orange flavored cloud. So here you can see just how light and airy this cake is. Don't just take my word for it. Give this recipe one try and I can guarantee that you would come back to it again and again. As always, thank you so much for watching, and in case you like this recipe, please do give this video a thumbs up, do subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next Tuesday.